Human development moves through distinct biological chapters, beginning in early infancy and eventually reaching the threshold of late adolescence. The specific developmental bridge between those points, the years from age 6 to 12, presents a unique set of conditions. In Hindi educational psychology, this exact window is formally defined as Balyavastha, or middle childhood. Out of an entire human lifespan, educational psychologists universally isolate this 6-year block as the most critical period for structured learning. The CTET syllabus provides the foundational claim, explicitly calling the ages of 6 to 12 the ideal stage of learning. Educators use this label because it represents a mathematically and clinically verifiable state of biological and psychological readiness. This optimal state only occurs because 3 separate developmental vectors, physical stability, logical cognition, and social drive, perfectly align at age 6. To master this phase for the CTET exam, we must look past rote memorization and deconstruct the physical, mental, and social pillars that make formal education possible. Consider the physical growth of an infant. It is explosive, chaotic, and consumes the vast majority of the body's energy. As a child approaches age 6, that biological chaos downshifts, and physical development settles into a steady, highly regulated pace. With rapid vertical growth paused, the body prioritizes internal fortification. This is the period where muscle tissues become significantly stronger. This muscular fortification directly triggers the child's sudden peak interest in physical activities and competitive sports. We see this newfound coordination manifest in the real world through complex, sustained physical play. This biological maturation acts as a strict prerequisite for academic readiness. Without the shift to a steady growth rate and the availability of muscular stamina, a child's body would be too restless to endure the sustained seated focus required by formal schooling. Once the body is physically stabilized, a radical restructuring occurs within the mind. The hallmark of early childhood cognition is a heavy reliance on pure imagination. Toddlers use fantasy to explain the mechanics of the world. The defining mental shift of middle childhood is the sharp decline of that fantasy. The notes specify that realism increases, taking precedence over imagination. As fantasy fades, structured logic and reasoning power rapidly develop to fill the void. The preeminent developmental psychologist who mapped this cognitive shift was Jean Piaget. Piaget classified the ages between 7 and 11 as the concrete operational stage, or Moot Sankriatmakavastha. To unpack that terminology, operational means the child can finally apply logic. Concrete dictates that this logic must remain tied to tangible, visible objects. In practice, a child at this stage can easily solve arithmetic problems if given physical blocks to count, but they will still struggle to grasp purely invisible, abstract concepts. This mental transition from fantasy to concrete, object-based logic is the exact mechanism that allows a teacher to finally introduce structured academic subjects like arithmetic and geography. A stable body and a logical mind prepare the individual, but they are insufficient for education if the child cannot function within a group environment. During middle childhood, the child's social center of gravity moves away from the parents and shifts squarely toward peer networks. The text outlines the new, intense social drives that emerge, a strong instinct to make friends, alongside the development of cooperation, competition, and leadership. Lev Vygotsky provided a clear perspective on why this group dynamic is critical for academics. Vygotsky argued that social interaction serves as the primary engine and functional basis for learning itself. To understand the psychological stakes within these newly formed peer groups, we look to Erik Erikson. Erikson defined the central crisis for this developmental phase as industry versus inferiority. Children in this bracket are fiercely driven to prove their competence against their peers, carrying a deep, motivating fear of falling behind or feeling inferior. Psychologist Stanley Hall created a famous structural label for this peer-obsessed era, the gang age. Hall's use of gang age is pedagogical. It describes the child's intense need to form tight-knit micro-societies bound by strict, self-imposed rules. This social matrix transforms the child from an isolated toddler into an active participant, ready for the structured, competitive, and cooperative ecosystem of a classroom. We have successfully deconstructed the internal anatomy of the ideal stage of learning. It relies on 3 specific pillars: physical stamina to sit, concrete logic to process information, and a social drive to participate. This theoretical blueprint directly solves the strict data parameters tested in the CTET examination. This data table reinforces the timeline. We can clearly see how Piaget's concrete operational stage neatly maps over the 6 to 12 age bracket. With the foundational architecture understood, answering these multiple-choice questions becomes a process of intuitive deduction. Historically, the concept of modern schooling was specifically engineered to capture the unique traits of this exact biological age. The developmental frameworks of Piaget, Vygotsky, and Erikson serve as functional operating manuals for the classroom. Effective pedagogical design requires a teacher to confidently leverage this natural biological trajectory rather than fight against it. Passing the CTET is a byproduct of mastering the underlying architecture of the developing human mind.